Future of Farming Today, where we talk to you about everything sustainable, everything regenerative, everything that's going to help move the agricultural industry from where it is now to a better and brighter future, not just for the people eating the food, but also for farmers, for other people who breathe the air, etc. At the end of the day, we can always utilize technology to make things worse for short-term gain, but of course, we're interested in helping the long-term strategy. We want to help farmers make more money and make a good living, but we also want to make sure that they're doing so in a way that's sustainable and that can be carried forward for many generations. That's the reason why we developed our crop booster technology. And of course, that's the reason why we're here today. Now, in today's episode, I have a very special treat for you guys. We did an interview with Dr. Heidi Peterson of the Sand County Foundation. She is the Vice President of Sustainability and Research, and she was kind enough to have a nice interview and share her thoughts and her advice as far as how we can be more sustainable, how we can be more regenerative, and how we can utilize technology to forward those ends. So I'm going to replay the video that we recorded when we did that interview a couple weeks ago. Because of the holidays, we couldn't quite do it, but I want to allow you guys to join in. And of course, if you guys have comments or questions for either Heidi or myself, please put them in the comments, and we'll be getting back to you. And if we can't answer the questions, then of course we'll talk to Dr. Peterson and have her reach out to you as well. So sit back, grab your popcorn, enjoy, and have a good day. Hold on one second here. So welcome everybody, and today we are joined by Dr. Heidi Peterson of the Sand County Foundation. It's an organization that seeks to support voluntary environmental conservation and help farmers and ranchers grow their produce in a more sustainable and environmentally friendly way. Now, Dr. Peterson holds a PhD in biosystems and agricultural engineering, as well as a bachelor's degree in natural resources and environmental science. So welcome, Dr. Peterson.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for having me on the show today.
Great. Yeah, again, as we were chatting a little bit earlier, my interest in you and the Sand County Foundation was born out of our desire to really focus and help the sustainable the guys that are interested in growing healthier food and moving toward regenerative practices for better environmental impact. And if you don't mind, just tell me a little bit about your work with Sand County and how that relates to that.
Yeah, so my title is Vice President of Agricultural Research and Conservation. And as you mentioned, what our organization is focused on, but Sand County Foundation is a relatively small national nonprofit, especially when you look at the history of the organization. We've been around for almost 60 years, yet we only have about 20 people currently on staff. The work that my team does through ag conservation is we're scientists working directly on the ground to demonstrate the implementation of innovation and conservation on working farms. And when I say conservation, that may be the NRCS conservation practices, it may be soil health management, regenerative agriculture, and so it basically any practice that's really going to benefit productivity and also wildlife habitat, water quality, greenhouse gas emissions. So thinking about it from that whole system. So we have boots on the ground working directly with farmers, ranchers, foresters, so private landowners and managers. And then we also have our Leopold Conservation Award, which recognizes conservation champions across the nation. Currently, that's offered in about 28 states. And then we also do a lot of outreach, and that includes outreach to high school students, so engaging the next generation of conservationists, and that's through our high school pollinator habitat program, and a land ethic mentorship program for historically underserved farmers and ranchers, and that includes beginning farmers, so folks that are just getting into agriculture and starting their own farm. So I wanted to also say, for anybody who is really already on board with regenerative agriculture, the name Sand County Foundation may ring a bell. So our name comes from Aldo Leopold's book that he wrote, and it was published in the 1940s, the Sand County Almanac. And Aldo Leopold basically is known as the father of wildlife conservation. So just wanted to explain that. If you wonder where we're located, where's Sand County? It's not a location. It's really, I think an approach to managing your land. You'll see it's all about a land ethic.
Right. So hopefully that'll be all counties that adopt these systems, in the future.
Right. Yes.
That's great. And so you're working mainly with a lot with farmers and ranchers into these different initiatives. And what challenges do you feel the growers in your region or the growers that you're working with are facing in terms of becoming better stewards of the land and better stewards of the environment?
Mm-hmm. So I work out of an office in Minnesota. And a lot of the work that we have been doing recently is across the Midwest. So I'm going to focus my answer on some of the farmers that we're engaging with in the Midwest. However, it would definitely expand to other regions of the nation as well. But across the Midwest, what we're seeing is that farmers are dealing with an increase in the number of extreme weather events. That means in a single year, they may have an increase in the frequency of intense rainfall events. That includes events with high wind or hail, in addition to the precipitation, but also longer periods of extended drought later in the season. And I think that oftentimes individuals who are not engaged in the agricultural sector don't necessarily understand the amount of planning that goes into farming. And although farmers plan and they prepare and they spend the whole previous year thinking about what is their system going to look like, they can never control Mother Nature. So with one storm, those plans can be completely derailed. And I think that's what the biggest challenge is right now, is dealing with the unknowns, the unpredictable weather that we have, and trying to identify, what can we do differently to become more resilient to these extreme weather events. And just as an example, a farmer can have a plan to implement cover crops, and then during the ideal time to go out and interseed the crop into their corn, they may have just saw a huge rainfall event that completely saturated their fields. And if they were to go out and plant the cover crop during that time, it could end up leading to compaction issues in their soil. So they have to consider all of these things. And what I think is just amazing is that farmers, ranchers, they're just, they're scientists. They're constantly thinking about what's happening above the soil, below the soil, and how their management is impacting them.
Right. And then we had some of our farmers see the same thing, where they had a very, very wet spring where they were delayed in planting, and then what our technology requires an irrigation system. And they said, look, I didn't even turn my irrigation on until July, which would be very unusual for them, right? So sometimes, like you said, your best laid plans or best made plans is all for naught if the weather doesn't cooperate or there's other challenges, for sure.
Correct. Yes. And actually, just thinking about our current system right now, our cropping year, Minnesota, a lot of the farms have already been harvested. And then we look at the sites that we're working with in Wisconsin, and most of those corn acres have not at all been harvested. And so even though they may want to get the crop off early, they can't control that because of the timing of the rainfall. And then, what is how dry is the grain, thinking about all of that and how it plays into the timing of the operations.
Right, for sure. So how is your work? How are you working with these farmers to help them implement more regenerative or more, I guess, environmentally friendly practices? Like how are you working with them?
Mhm. So what we've found, and it also goes along with a lot of the research that's being done by some of the social scientists and the universities across the Midwest, is that the best way to advance conservation is really through peer-to-peer learning. And sometimes you may view what your neighbor's doing as, peculiar, why would they be doing that right now? And often the conversations are, not directly with your neighbor, but because you don't feel comfortable asking them why they're doing something with their management. And that may be planting grain, which means planting into a live cover crop, or maybe even using strip till technology. But when that opportunity is presented to learn from each other and break down those barriers to communication, it's much easier to discuss the management decisions. So, for example, we have a couple projects right now where farmers are paired based on their management and soil type. So we have farmers across the Midwest, and each of them are paired with somebody who's managing a system that's like opposite of what they're doing. And so we may have some of the early adopters of soil health management or regenerative ag paired with somebody who's a late adopter. So they're not using a long rotation, or they're not trying cover crops, or they use a lot of tillage in their management. And so by pairing them up, we're also giving them access to technology. So real time soil moisture and temperature sensors that is allowing them to see what's happening below the surface. Because a lot of times farmers are looking at just the yield at the end of the year as an indicator of success, and what is happening on their land and the result of their management. But if we can give them some data during the season to also see how their management is helping them through these periods of drought or extreme precipitation events, then they can also understand how their yields would have been impacted if they weren't using that management. And so by pairing up the farmers and giving them data, it starts a conversation. And it breaks down that barrier to communication and allows them to have the conversation over the fence row, to learn from each other, ask for help, get ideas on how to implement a new management practice in their operation. And often it ends up resulting in a partnership where if somebody doesn't have a specific piece of equipment, their neighbor may work together with them to let them use their tool or plant their cover crop for them. So I think that peer-to-peer network, that's what we as an organization, Sand County Foundation, is really backing, is trying to get more interaction between farmers and learning from those true champions across the landscape.
Awesome. That's absolutely true. And we run into that a lot too, where, like you mentioned, some farmers are a very tight-knit community in some ways. They talk a lot, they share coffee together, etc. They peer across the fence. In other cases, they look at, well, that's my competition over there, right? So sometimes there's a little bit of a reluctance to say everything that you're doing. So there's a combination of those two for sure.
Correct.
And it's great that you're helping build those relationships and build that communication, because I think that just helps everybody, right? When everybody can figure out what the best thing for everybody is, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And actually, in being able to see past that competitive, like whose yield is greater. I think it also helps everybody in the whole region as well, because these are the types of practices that and management strategies that first, it's going to increase the land value within an area if everyone is building up healthier soils and over time increasing yield and their productivity. And then it also results in the improved environmental benefits as well. That is going to come back to that local community.
Right. And then my next question is more on the water side, because this is something that I get this question a lot when I talk to farmers, and usually they ask me the question relating to our irrigation technology. But the question is, like, what role, or how important, I should say, is water quality to overall agricultural production? Like, how important is that in terms of improving overall production, not just in a season, but maybe over time as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that I will answer that question is thinking about it from how does agricultural productivity affect water quality? Because it kind of goes hand in hand. If a farm is losing the soil because of it's being washed away through excessive rainfall events or snowmelt, let's say even, then that means that there's that healthy topsoil that's full of the organic matter and the nutrients that are going to be critical to crop productivity, that's also being lost with the runoff that's coming from those fields. So soil belongs on the farm, and we want to make sure that the soil is staying on the farm so that the nutrients and the organic matter that's being lost with the runoff, that's also money, right? That means that as we lose the soil, as we lose the nutrients, that we have to put more inputs into our system. And so we want to keep all of that out of our water, because then we don't have to worry about finding out that our beaches are closed or that we have a algae bloom, and with this toxic chemicals, and the production of the algae that can impact our fish and our own dogs, even from swimming in a lake that's been impacted. Really, it comes down to also the overall income of a farm, if they're losing their fertilizer or manure is running off of their field. We want to keep all of that in place on the land.
Sure, absolutely. And we get they call it red tide down here, where they have those algae
Yes.
blooms, which are killing off the fish down here in the Gulf in Florida. But you can only imagine the Great Lakes got to be very much a similar situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is often within our riverways, and part of this also is when we think about the management that we're doing for our farm productivity. It's also changing the quantity of water that's coming through our drainage systems. So when you look at like the stream flow, we may be increasing stream flow if the water is running off the land too quickly. So all of these practices around regenerative agriculture are also going to help increase infiltration so that it's filtered through the soil. The soil is working like a sponge and a filter. So as it comes out as groundwater and into our river system, at that point, it's treated, it's clean, and also it's not resulting in these high stream flow rates that can cause stream bank failure and release of all of the sediment that's settled out over time in the bottom of the rivers. So you have a little lesson of hydrology here. So my background, I focused a lot on hydrology during my PhD studies.
No problem. Well, that's good information to know, because sometimes we don't think about it. We'll think about, okay, what's happening after the water leaves that farm, and how is that also affecting, not just, again, this season, but maybe future seasons. Like, what is this doing for next year or 5 years from now, right?
Right.
And I think you kind of partly answered my next question, which was going to be what role does soil health, but maybe more importantly, what role does like microbial populations and microbial health in the soil, what role does that play in overall production? And how important is that for a sustainable sort of farming operation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so microbes are a critical piece to productivity and the access of plants' ability to access nutrients in the soil. So if we don't have the right microbial population, then some of the nutrients like phosphorus, specifically thinking about the availability of phosphorus for plant uptake, it requires certain microbial communities to be able to make it available for plant uptake. And so that's a big piece of it. And also thinking about the ability of the soil to fight off potential diseases that may impact crops in the future. So if you have a very healthy microbial population, it will remove the risk of some of the negative microbes that can lead to disease within your plants. So that's really important. It also helps with carbon sequestration and the ability to reduce greenhouse gas emission. And so this is just, it's a whole system. And I think that's what's really exciting about agriculture and the way we manage our land is the benefit that to water quality, the benefit to wildlife habitat, the benefit to our air quality. I mean, it all fits together, and it's a whole ecological system.
Right. And so what would you say to farmers who are more resistant to change? Like, let's say they're a conventional farmer. They're just like, hey, all this sounds great, or maybe they're not saying that, like, what would you say to a farmer who's maybe like, hey, I don't want to switch what I'm doing because it's working for me? And how would you might address that?
Yeah, I always want to start out by just listening to what their concerns are and what are their goals. And if they are hesitant because of something they saw before or something they read, then and this is how we structure a lot of our projects at Sand County Foundation, we'll set up a demonstration with them to try something new. And I also will remind any producer that you don't want to go all in. You want to, if you're trying something for the first time, just pick an area and maybe it's a couple acres. It's not all of your land, and slowly integrate that new management into that specific area, and then see over time what happens. And maybe you want to add a little bit more land into that management. We don't want to encourage anybody to just make the switch overnight completely every acre of their management, because not every practice is going to work perfectly on every acre of land. So it's important to try it out on a small area. Be patient. It takes time to see change. And that's, I think, really the most important piece. Patience, because you're not going to see it overnight. And as I've been talking about through some of the previous discussion, our weather plays such a big part of it. So, we are really working with a lot of challenges to overcome from season to season. So just because it doesn't work the first time you try it doesn't mean it's not going to work the next year. And then the third thing I want to point out is that if anybody is looking to try new management, then they should really find a mentor, or somebody within their county, in their specific region that their farm is located, that's already doing that practice. And don't be hesitant to ask them for their advice. We're working with a group of farmers in Wisconsin that have been doing rotational grazing with cover crops. And there's one farmer within the farmer group that has a specific cocktail recipe of cover crop seeds that he's found success on his land for grazing. And the other farmers are using that same cocktail. And I think that it's it's a conversation that sometimes is hard to initiate, but I think as you learn something new on your land, you want to, and most farmers want to help other farmers reduce the barriers to adoption. And so to be able to help somebody else not have to have that same hurdle that they, or to make the wrong mistake, that first time trying something new. And so being able to share those lessons learned with somebody else is really meaningful. So don't ever be hesitant to ask a neighbor for assistance on how did you start this? What are you using? Because I think that that's going to be a step in the right direction.
Wow, it's great information and great advice too, because sometimes there is no silver bullet that handles everything, right? But those incremental changes as you continually to use them for sure will definitely lead you in that right path in the right direction for sure.
Exactly. And yeah, we can't, there are some times when we'll hear about a field day on a specific practice. And I think it's important to remember that one practice may work in a specific cropping year because of the rotation that you have, and maybe the next year it's not going to work. So then you want to try something else. And so we're at a point in time where we have to be looking at all the tools in our toolbox and thinking about how can we integrate all of these new innovations into our management for continuing to improve our productivity, but also at the same time to help with all of the ecological benefits as well.
Awesome. Well, Heidi, if one of our listeners, one of our farmers wants to work with you or your organization, like how could they get in touch with you? What would be the way that they could initiate that conversation?
I think the best way is to look at our website. And that can be identified by just Googling Sand County Foundation. And you'll come up to a page that has a list of all of our staff members. And they'll be able to find me there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate the time. I mean, it's been super informative. And I know there's a lot of farmers out there who are looking for information like this, that they want to change and want to improve what they're doing, but they just need a little bit of a hand holding, a little bit, or like, good, I see the end goal, but I need help getting there, right? And I think that what you're doing is amazing, and definitely keep up the good work for sure.
Well, Jim, thank you for the time today, and I hope that that anybody who's listening who's ever thought about trying something new, that they take this as an opportunity to embrace the change and reach out to a local conservation district or local neighbor and see how they can get started.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.